My boyfriend has always acted weird and distant around my toddler niece, and today I finally found out the real reason why. I, 27 female, have been with my boyfriend Jay, 28 male, for 5 years. We've both been very close with each other's families, and we've even talked about marriage. However, one touchy subject is children. Whenever we discuss it, he gets kinda standoffish. He doesn't really dismiss the idea though, it's just that he doesn't seem invested. I've always wanted kids, and he just always says he's fine with whatever makes me happy. Ever since, I've been content with this situation. However, things escalated during this holiday season. Our setup has always been that Jay spends Christmas Eve and dinner with my family, then I spend Christmas Day with his family. This was the first Christmas I'll spend with my first and only niece Anna, 2 female. She spent her first Christmas in the hospital due to her health condition, but she's okay now, so I made sure to spend a lot of time with her. We played a lot, we opened gifts together, and I even reenacted Anna's favorite storybook using her favorite doll. We even had matching outfits. My sister Amy, 30 female, thanked me for giving her and her husband some relief from childcare the entire day. However, Amy also said she noticed that Jay, who was just either sitting on the couch watching me or helping my mom with the dishes, was kinda distant with Anna. I told her I've also noticed that before, and I just chalked it up to maybe Jay was hesitant and awkward to play with Anna because he feels he's just my boyfriend. Then Amy said she won't mind, since she and her husband already treat Jay as part of our family. I then went back to Jay and encouraged him to play with Anna and help us set up her new dollhouse, but he said he's not feeling too well. He ended up drinking a few more beers and stayed on the porch by himself, scrolling on his phone. I didn't press harder and thought he might really just be feeling under the weather. I just want to add for context that Jay isn't an alcoholic. He's a sweet, wonderful, funny man who's sometimes broody and deep in thought, but he's never abusive, manipulative, or moody, and he only drinks on special occasions. The next day, on Christmas Day, we had lunch with Jay's family. Afterward, I volunteered for cleanup to help Jay's mom Mary, 62 female, and brother John, 31 male. Jay's family was the best any significant other could ever ask for. They're very sweet and supportive of us, but they're never prying. They always check up on us, but they never overstep. So, as we were cleaning up, Mary asked me how my sister's baby was. They helped with the bills when Anna was hospitalized last year. I told them that Anna's in great condition now, and that she already spent the Christmas at home. They were very delighted upon hearing this. Then, I shared with them the thing I noticed about Jay. Initially, I thought maybe Mary could just give me advice on how to approach the issue with Jay since he's clearly not the playing with kids kind of guy, but then John casually said something like, "Oh, because of Rosie." Then Mary quickly shushed him. Rosie was the daughter of Jay and John's eldest sister, Beth, 35 female. I never knew the actual details because everyone was very secretive about it, but all I knew was that Rosie passed away when she was just 3 years old and Beth and her husband moved away afterward. I never met them in person. So, later that night, when Mary, John, and the other family members got a bit more drunk and Jay was already sleeping in the bedroom, they told me the story. I didn't force them or anything. Apparently, Jay, being the youngest of the siblings, was really close with Rosie back then. Jay was just around 14 years old when Rosie was born, so he became the super fun uncle, like I am now with Anna. He was actually Rosie's best friend. Then, on summer of 2012, Jay was playing with Rosie outside. He was blowing bubbles and she was chasing and popping them, when a speeding car, driven by a woman who was distracted on her phone, skidded into the yard toward Rosie's direction. Jay reacted quickly and was able to reach and grab Rosie so the car actually hit him, but the impact of the crash caused Rosie's head to whiplash as Jay hugged her. Jay was in a coma for 3 days and had multiple severe injuries and internal bleeding, but Rosie didn't make it. Everything was caught by the neighbor's CCTV, so everyone knew that Jay was a hero for trying to protect Rosie. It was even covered by the local news, but Beth, who was understandably in grief, resented Jay for not being able to save her daughter. Beth and her husband then decided to move to another country to cope with their grief and start a new life, and they've had minimal contact with the family ever since. Jay, meanwhile, took the loss really hard. He blamed himself for not being able to save Rosie and not being able to attend her funeral since he was still at the hospital at that time. Mary said that Jay was never the same after that. He never went near kids, and he became a lot colder, quieter, more reserved, and antisocial. He also had anger issues, but thankfully it went away. I haven't had any issues with this. We also live in an area where people don't believe in therapy, so Jay never received professional help. After learning all of this, I bawled my eyes out because I never knew Jay was carrying such a heavy burden. The whole incident became a taboo family secret that no one mentions in fear of Jay breaking down or doing something he might regret, although to be fair, he's never had violent or self-harm tendencies ever since, so this was just a precaution. They also never told me before because they assumed Jay would be the one to tell me, but I told them that he never did, and that I never really asked him. I then thanked everyone for letting me in on this, and I told them that I'd talk to Jay about it when the time is right. They understood, and they said I could just ring them up if I need help or support in any way. For now, I just want Jay to enjoy the holidays and his remaining vacation days from work. Now, I don't really know how to start with him. I know seeking professional help to process all the trauma and grief, even if it's been over a decade ago, would be the top priority, but I don't know how to bring it up to him. I don't even know when is the right time to bring it up. I just want him to know that I love him no matter what, and that I'll support him in every step toward his healing, especially if we're to form a family of our own. Update 112 days later. Hi, it's been a while since my first post, and I have some major updates for anyone interested. Also, I took some time to organize my thoughts first to make sure I don't miss anything pertinent. It's kinda long as a lot have happened since, so I've divided this into sections to make it easier to follow. Part 1, The Confession. Since learning about Rosie and posting here on Reddit, I've been so conflicted about what to do. A lot of you had opposing opinions, and all of them had merit, but knowing Jay and how he'd most likely react, I chose to keep it a secret until I find the perfect time. What I didn't anticipate was that the perfect time would come in the form of a pregnancy scare. Back in January, I had a false positive. Everything happened so quickly within a day. I had a roller coaster of emotions, but bottom line was that I'm not pregnant after all. When Jay got back home that night, I knew I had to tell him everything. I told him I had a pregnancy scare, but he has nothing to worry about since it ended up being negative. At that moment, I saw all the blood drain from his face, and he became so pale that I was worried he was going to faint. I was holding his hand, and he became so sweaty and cold and shaky. He rushed to our refrigerator to get some water, and it was obvious he was spiraling really hard. That was when I told him I knew about Rosie. I came clean because I knew that was what he was panicking about. I assured him that I'm by his side, and he could react however he wanted to. I repeatedly apologized for disrespecting his trust and lying to him for weeks. I also asked him to please not be mad at his family because they meant well when they told me. Throughout all of it, I couldn't really read Jay's expressions. I wasn't sure if he was about to scream out of anger or burst into tears. I told him that we don't have to talk about it any further if he doesn't want to, but I'd be willing to listen and support him whenever he's ready. His only response that time was him asking me if I wanted to break up with him, which confused me. I told him of course not, then we hugged, then he said he needs some time to process everything before we discuss it, which I respected. For the rest of the week, we tried to interact like nothing happened, but everything was awkward since there's this huge thing hanging between us. Part 2, The Talk. The following weekend, which was 8 days after, we finally sat down and talked about everything. He started by apologizing for not telling me sooner, but he revealed that his last girlfriend dumped him after he told her about Rosie. He said he was so relieved after I reassured him that I wouldn't do that. He then told me that it was something that's been weighing him ever since, and he's confirmed that he never sought or received professional help. However, he said he's very much open to doing that, but he didn't think he's ready yet. He also said he's afraid to go down that path because it might release some inner demons and drag me down with him. Another thing Jay told me was that ever since Rosie was born, he felt an instant and deep connection and a sense of responsibility for her, even when he was just a teenager that time. He said that having Rosie in his life made him realize how much he wanted to be a father when he's older. However, since the incident, he's afraid of messing things up again, so he never really considered having kids from then on despite really wanting to do so. I then reassured him that we're on the same page on this. Although I also want to have kids with him in the future, I don't want to force it on him when he's not yet ready. He also said that whenever he sees me with Anna, my niece, he gets kinda jealous because he wants to join us every time. However, he constantly reminds himself to keep his distance just to be safe. I told him he doesn't have to worry about that, and that he's more than welcome to join us if he wants to. I also told him that my sister and the rest of my family actually considers him a part of our family, just to reassure him more. Jay tried to lighten the mood by joking and saying now that I know everything about him and still didn't break up with him, I could finally expect a proposal anytime soon. We both had a good laugh, but we agreed to wait for his recovery first before getting engaged or discussing our future family. Part 3, Beth. During our discussion, Jay also had another heartbreaking revelation. He said that during the height of the pandemic, Beth's husband, Brian, reached out to him. Brian said that Beth had COVID and was confined in a hospital, and that he was already running low on funds due to bills and unemployment. He also said that Beth had been almost catatonic since Rosie's passing. She had been resistant to any outside and professional help, but she was institutionalized for about a year after a self-harming incident. For the past decade, she'd been cold, distant, and withdrawn from society. Apparently, the rest of Jay's family also knew about all this, but again, they just swept it under the rug. To be fair, they had been helping Brian by sending financial aid to support Beth, but their version of the story was that Beth had just gone low contact since they moved. Also, to be very clear, Jay said that Beth never blamed him for what happened to Rosie, although he initially felt that way when he was younger. It was more of their parents interpreting and spinning things a certain way to avoid tarnishing their family's reputation, but when Brian reached out to him directly years ago, he started to understand better. However, he still hasn't processed everything, and he still partly blames himself for the whole thing. Part 4, Our Current Situation. For now, what we're exploring is couples therapy so we can discuss our mutual issues in a safe and pressure-free space, and hopefully, kind of ease him into the world of therapy. We've already found the perfect therapist to help us, and we've now had 6 sessions with her. From what I can tell, Jay seems a lot happier and less burdened. We've also had homeworks from our sessions, and Jay was even the one reminding me to do them. Right now, I'm just hoping that he becomes ready enough to open up about Rosie so he can heal and recover from his trauma. Not for me, but for his mental and emotional well-being. No rush though, all in his own time. Also, Jay has no social media, but I showed him the original Reddit post I made. He spent like 3 hours reading through all the comments. It was the first time I saw him get teary-eyed because he never expected so many people giving him support and saying kind words to him. He was extremely overwhelmed by everyone's kindness, so we're both grateful to all of you for that. So, there, if you've made it this far into our story, thank you for your time. I have a good feeling that Jay and I are going to be fine. We still have a lot of challenges ahead of us, but here's to hoping for the best.
When I was about 10, I became best friends with a strange boy who just showed up one day. We were inseparable for a year until he vanished without a trace, and I could never find him again. Okay, so I was probably around 10 or 11 years old the first time I remember the boy turning up. It was the middle of summer and my friends and I were swimming in a lake in one of my parents' fields. I grew up in a small farmer's town, with a population of no more than 200, and so everyone knew everyone. There were 2 schools in the town, one for boys and one for girls. I'm not sure why they split them by gender, and I'm pretty sure both have merged now, but that's what it was like when I lived there. I'm going to tell it how I remember it happening, but my friend who was there at the time remembers it slightly differently than I do. So, as I was saying, my friends, I think it was about 4 of us in total, and I were swimming in the lake at the bottom of one of my parents' fields. It was about a 15-minute walk from my main house. We had been playing there for a while, when we heard someone calling to us. We looked over and saw the boy standing at the edge of the lake, completely exposed. Once we noticed him, he shouted if he could play with us. He looked to be around the same age as us, maybe a little older but not by much. He was super pale, like white pale. I remember being amazed and kind of jealous of his super bright green eyes. He also had shoulder-length white blonde hair, like Draco Malfoy blonde. I looked to my friends, and we said yeah, and he came in the lake with us. None of us recognized him. Which as I said was weird because we had all lived in this tiny town for our whole lives and everyone basically knew everyone living there. He introduced himself as Richard, but he said he prefers if we called him Richie, so we did. I remember asking Richie where he was from, but he would go all awkward and would never give a straight answer. Anyway, after a while more of playing in the lake, Richie seemed fun and I invited him to come back to my house for supper. He straight away said he would love to come, and my friend was like, "Don't you need to ask your mom?" To which Richie said something like, "Oh, she won't mind." Remember how I said Richie was completely exposed? Well, that wasn't so strange. In fact, I'm pretty sure we all were. My friends and I were all boys, and we would skinny dip in the lake normally, so it didn't stick out to me when he first arrived like that. But what did stick out to me was when we got out of the lake, dried and dressed ourselves, Richie had no clothes with him to get dressed into. Which I remember thinking was super weird, but he said something like, "Oh, I must have forgot to bring them." Which again, I thought was very weird, like how do you forget your clothes? I wasn't sure how my parents would react to me bringing home an exposed boy, so I gave him my briefs and my overshirt to put on. But yeah, that stuck out as very odd. My friends went back home, and Richie and I went to my house. My dad was like, "Where's his clothes?" I just made something up. I'm pretty sure I said something like his clothes got wet, so we left them in the sun to dry. I got him some trousers to put on. We ate supper, which I remember him having 3 or 4 plates of. As I said, Richie is a super skinny boy. I was pretty small and skinny at the time as well, but he was definitely skinnier than I was, so I was confused how he ate so much lol. Richie was super polite and sweet to everyone while he was at my house. After supper I took him upstairs to my room and we played on my Nintendo 64 together. He had never seen one before and was super amazed by it. At the time I thought he had never seen one because they were so old. This was 2010. But my family was poor and that's all I had. It started to get dark, and I asked him if he wanted to sleep over. He was really excited by that and said yeah. I checked with my parents, but I knew they wouldn't mind because they were both super drunk. So, we continued playing on Nintendo 64 until it was super late. After a while, I said it was time that we went to bed as I was tired, but I don't remember him seeming tired at all. Richie asked if he could shower before as we had been playing in my fields and he was really muddy. As he was showering, I made my bed for us and put a movie on the TV for us to watch as we went to sleep, and I got into bed. Richie came in like 5 minutes later and was completely exposed again. I was like, "Did you walk from the bathroom like that?" He was like yeah and didn't seem to care at all, so even though I thought it was strange I didn't say anything. He got into my bed, I asked him if he wanted any pajamas and he said no, it was too hot, which to be fair I do remember it being really hot that day. I had a Scooby-Doo movie on, and he was really excited by it, and didn't know anything about them, which I guess isn't too weird. But looking back, he didn't seem to know any pop culture stuff at all. I mean, we were pretty behind the times in my small town, but we still knew most pop culture. I had slept in quite a lot the next day, but when I woke up Richie wasn't in my room. I went and asked my mom if she'd seen him and she said he left early that morning after his parents rang our house. How they knew he was with us or where to ring I'm still not sure. Richie had taken some shorts from my room because my mom said he couldn't leave without clothes on. I was a little disappointed he left without me, or at least without saying goodbye or without leaving any way of contacting him again. He turned up again a couple days later when my friends and I were swimming in the lake again. This time he brought clothes, but I'm pretty sure he only brought some briefs and a shirt with no pants. Which again, I thought was weird. Over the next year, him and I became super close. We were like brothers. Over the year, I asked if I could see his home or meet his family, but anytime I asked anything personal about him, he would go awkward and not want to talk about it. Or he would just change the subject. But I could see it made him feel uncomfortable, so I didn't push him to tell me. He did tell me he was homeschooled, which I thought was cool. Because in my mind that meant no school. As I said, we became really close over the year. I felt like he was more than a friend to me. It's difficult to explain, it's almost like we clicked from the first time we met. We became close really quick, and I felt like I could tell him anything and he would always help and support me. He helped me through so many hard times, and he definitely encouraged me to be a better person. It was almost as if he could sense when I was going through anything. For example, when my grandma passed away, I went out into my fields to cry as I didn't want to do it in front of my family. But after sitting down in some random place, Richie turned up and sat next to me. He said some things that I remember helping me a lot. When I asked him how he found me, he said that we were just on a walk. Not too long after this, he just vanished. It had been a little over a year since the first time he appeared at the lake. It was around September the year after, so it had been around a year and 2 or 3 months. He never turned up again, never said goodbye, never left a trace. I was massively upset. I really missed him. I would walk around the fields looking for him and I would hang out by the lake where we first met, hoping that he would turn up, but he never did again. I still don't know what happened to him. I've tried searching social media for him but with no luck, and since he would never tell me that much about his life, I don't have that much to go on. I asked my parents what they remember of him. They said they remember him being odd, and that they were unsure about him at first, especially how he had a tendency to strip exposed whenever he felt like it. But they also said that he and I were inseparable, and wherever I was he was sure to be found there too. They said they remember me being heartbroken when he stopped appearing, and they weren't sure whether they should call the police about him being gone, but they never did. I kind of wish they did. I suppose this is a long shot, but if you're reading this, Richie, reach out to me. I'd love to speak to you again and get some answers to all the weird things about you. It's completely possible that there isn't anything paranormal about Richie, but it is definitely strange. Update 1.1. I am visiting my parents for a couple weeks. I will search the house for any photos of Richie and I that I could share here. Though, with 7 older brothers and a lot of family photos, I'm not sure I'll find anything. Also, there is a fun day at the local church to celebrate the schools breaking up for summer holiday. As suggested by a commenter, I am going to attend the coffee morning where all the old people who live in the village go. Even if this means waking up at 7 a.m. I am going to be asking around to see if anyone remembers Richie. I will update this thread tomorrow if I find anything. Update 1.2. I have asked around at my local church today. No one seemed to remember Richie. I started to lose a little hope. But word must have spread around that I was looking for someone. Because an old lady, I'll call her Sharon in this, who I know, but haven't ever really spoken to before, came up to me. She says she thinks she might know Richie's maternal great-aunt. She is going to try and find the contact details for me so I can reach out and see if the great-aunt has any info on Richie. Sharon says if Richie does belong to the family she's thinking of, then he would have lived at a cottage around an hour and 15-minute walk from the main village. She said the cottage is secluded, with no neighbors. Sharon has no idea why they disappeared, but she said she isn't that close to Richie's great-aunt. I hope this is good news. I might actually be a step closer to finding Richie again. I'll update with any more news if I find any. I'm hoping that this possible aunt is still alive and hasn't changed contact details. Wish me luck. Update 1.3. I have contacted Richie's potential great-aunt, PGA for short lol, with no luck. I called the number that Sharon gave to me a couple times. With no answer, though I have left a message explaining who I am. I sent a letter first class to the address that Sharon gave me as well, which should get there tomorrow or the day after. Hopefully the PGA is still living at the address, and I am able to get some answers. In the letter I also explained why I was interested in contacting her, and I gave my phone number if she would like to call me instead of writing back. I will update as soon as I have anything new. Oh, and one more thing. I visited the cottage where Sharon thought Richie could have been living. The cottage is abandoned and run down. Seems likely that he could have been living here. It gave off massive creepy vibes though. Update 1.4. I have heard back from the PGA. I'll name her Jane. Someone suggested that I check if the number was linked to any apps like WhatsApp. It was, and I reached out to Jane on there. This seemed to do the trick and she messaged me back relatively quickly. After describing Richie to her, she said pretty confidently that she is related to Richie. This is where things take a bad turn. Jane hasn't been in contact with Richie's family for many years. But she does have the phone number of Richie's older sister. I had no idea he even had any siblings at all. Jane insinuated that I won't find what I'm looking for when contacting Richie's sister. I fear the worst. It seems as though something has happened to Richie. Jane told me that Richie's sister will be able to tell me more, gave me her number and then hung up the phone. I'm incredibly anxious to reach out to Richie's sister. This could be the end to the search that has taken me so long. But I fear that it isn't the ending that I have dreamed of. I will update this thread once I know more. Update 2. This journey has been difficult. Many years I have searched for answers on where Richie is now. Sadly, it is not good news. Deep down, I think I feared and perhaps avoided searching for Richie in case this was the outcome. For the sake of clarity I will name Richie's older sister Sarah. Sarah helped put into context Richie, his odd behavior, his unwillingness to show me his home and his disappearance. Sarah and Richie both suffered abuse and neglect at the hands of their father. Their father, who suffered with severe mental health issues and substance-related problems for most of his adult life. Their father was terrified of the outside world, and thus kept them secluded away in secret. According to Sarah, their father was convinced that the world was months away from ending at any given time. He was convinced that the devil was planning to take over his mind and body, and was convinced that Jesus had spoken to him, and told him the only way to keep him and his family safe was to keep them secluded from the outside world. Sarah shared that their father would not often be physically abusive, which I suppose is of some relief. Richie and his family would move often throughout his childhood, never staying in one place for too long as his father feared that the devil would soon find them. Sarah said they were most likely moved in the middle of the night with no forewarning, though she can't remember the specific time they were moved from my town. This helps to explain how Richie seemed to appear one day, and disappear 15 months later. Richie passed away at age 15, around 2.5 years after vanishing from my town. Sarah struggled to go into the details of Richie's death, and I didn't want to push her into sharing something that was painful for her, though it seemed that Richie took his own life. Sarah told me that Richie would often speak of me, and the time we spent together, and that all Richie ever wanted to do was to come back and find me. Sadly, he never managed that. She said she thought that I was just imaginary. She isn't sure how Richie would sneak out of the house to meet with me, but said that their father would keep them locked in their rooms for days and sometimes weeks at a time. Sarah told me she has a collection of Richie's diaries, which I do remember him writing occasionally. She has offered to send them to me, which is lovely of her. She told me that a lot of the writing is about me, about our time together, about how he wanted to find me again so we could run away together. Again, she never thought I was a real person. Hearing that was so incredibly bittersweet. I look forward to reading those diaries, even though it will be incredibly difficult at the same time. She said she is glad that Richie managed to have an impact on someone on this world. I wish that I was able to express the impact that Richie had on my life. I wish I could tell Richie the impact he had on my life. I want everyone to know Richie. I want everyone to know what an amazing, kind and beautiful person Richie was. This post is difficult for me to write. Deep down, I think that I resisted searching for Richie more in case this was the outcome. Sarah told me a lot more information, but I've decided to leave out most to respect her privacy. Sarah is away and safe from her father, which I am so glad about. Richie, I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I'm sorry I didn't pick up on the signals that you were in danger. I hope you can forgive me. Richie, you were the only true friend I've ever had. It's so hard for me to write this. I feel so sick that I didn't do more. Richie, I want you to know you saved me so many times throughout my life. So many low moments in my life have been helped because of the memories of you. I am so sorry I wasn't there for you the same way you were there for me. I love you so much, Richie. Update 3. Hello everyone. Almost 1 year ago I made a Reddit post searching for answers about a childhood friend of mine that went missing. Recently that post has resurfaced, and so I thought I'd give you all an update on where I am today and how I'm doing, as well as how Sarah is doing. It still pains me to think about Richie, and think about how I could have and should have helped him and how I failed to save him. It does really hurt to look back on it. I really don't have many friends and I suffer from pretty bad anxiety, and I just wish I had Richie here with me. Sarah and I still occasionally talk, but not really as often as I wish we could. I have met her in real life once, which was nice. To answer a couple of the common questions, yes, I am currently in therapy. I started it not too long ago along with some medication, as I have suffered for a while with severe anxiety. I am currently requesting permission from Sarah before I post any of Richie's journal entries, as I feel she should have final say on if she wants those out on the internet. No, I am not writing a book about Richie. No, this is not a promotion for a book. If anyone was to write a book about Richie and his life, I would think it should be Sarah. However, she does not have any interest in sharing her story. She would much rather leave the past in the past, and honestly I can't blame her. It really breaks my heart that there are so many people in here sharing that they knew a Richie, or they were a Richie. I feel like so many children, even now, go under the radar, the lives they live and the abuse they receive with no one there to help. It hurts to think that there could have been so many with us today that have sadly passed on and are no longer with us. I think everyone has a right to be remembered, and I am so glad that Richie has had an impact on so many people here. Update 4. This is strange for me to be back, but I just wanted to give a short update about my life and the life of me and Sarah now. It has been almost 10 years since he unalived himself. And though I think of him less now than I did before, I still think of him. It seems insane to me that it has been almost 3 years since I posted the original post. Sarah and I speak, but still not often. We met up on his birthday last year, but we didn't this year. The year before that I didn't even know it was his birthday. Sarah is doing really well, at least from what she tells me, but again we aren't close. Sarah and I love the fact that this subreddit keeps the memory of Richie alive. She's really grateful that so many people know her brother's story. I encouraged her to make a post, but she said having that many eyes on her would be far too scary. I can understand that. I don't believe in an afterlife, not anymore. Maybe I did at one point. Richie was a real one, in every way. So, I am glad that his memory can at least live on. Sarah did not give me permission to post Richie's journals, which I am glad about, because that would have been an invasion of his privacy too far. He has some very personal inner thoughts in them, and sometimes even I feel weird reading. You can very much tell they were written by someone who was in a lot of pain, and it is so sad for me to see them get more and more dark as he grows up. It makes me still upset that I couldn't help him in the way that he helped me. One page I will always cherish is a drawing he made of us both, labeled love.
My husband confessed to me that he's in love with my sister. I'm pregnant and I don't know what I did to deserve this. My sister, 32 female, and I, 28 female, had a really crappy life growing up with a passive mother and an abusive stepfather. My sister was my protector and role model since no one of the adults were. She tried to shift my stepdad's abuse on her when he got drunk so he wouldn't hurt me. When she left for college, she let me stay in her bed while she slept on the floor in her student room, the days I managed to run away from home. When I turned 16, she let me move in with her permanently. We never saw our parents again. My husband, 33 male, is very similar to my sister. They're both very calm and kind. Both very intelligent, and they have the same sense of humor, love the same music, books, movies, and games. It's like a weird pervy thing that I found the male version of my sister to fall in love with. They get along very well, and that was so important to me because they're my only family. We got married a year ago after 6 years together, and I'm 27 weeks pregnant now with our first baby. My sister met her boyfriend, 30 male, a year ago. He got along very well with me and my husband, although I always felt that my husband never really liked the guy. When I asked him once why he didn't like him, he got flustered and told me that he didn't know it was noticeable and apologized. He told me he just didn't think he was good enough for her. Well, her boyfriend proposed to her last night. We were just having pizzas and they were having beers on my sister's balcony, and the boyfriend just suddenly went down on his knees and took out a ring. She was very surprised but happy all the same and said yes. When we went back home, my husband was a little tipsy. He told me he wasn't tired and that he's going to take one more beer and watch TV and that I should go to bed. I went back to the living area and he was sitting there crying. I asked him what's going on and he told me that he was in love with my sister. Has been for years, but that he knew how wrong this was. He told me that he loved me very much and promised to be a good husband and father to our daughter. He slept on the couch. He's still sleeping now. I'm so shocked and full of anxiety. I don't know what to do or how to feel about this. My sister, should I tell her? Nothing can be the same again, but she's my only family and my best friend. And my husband. Is this over? I have been so blind, now I see everything. Of course he's in love with her, how could I be shocked now? Can I save this marriage? And my baby? I promised her a better life than the one I had. I promised her kind and loving parents. I can't let her come to this world with estranged parents and new people in their lives. What can I do? Small update, he is awake now and I have spoken to him. He apologized for hurting me last night. He said that he just felt despair, like he had something very beloved and important in his life that he lost and he was mourning it. He told me he loved me very much and he wanted for this to work for us and the baby. I asked him if he loved her more than me and he said it's just a different type of love. I asked him if he could choose between me or her, he said he'd choose me. I asked him if he thought she was more beautiful and he said that I'm conventionally more attractive. I asked him if he stayed with me all these years to be near her. He said I was being unfair to him because he did love me. I asked him if he is okay never seeing her again. He teared up but then said he would do anything to save this marriage. He then added that he never really had a mother or a female figure in his life. That's probably why he's attached to her, because she is very warm and loving. I asked him, do you love her as a mother figure or do you want to sleep with her? He didn't want to answer. I asked him if he fantasized about her while sleeping with me. He refused to answer at first and then said, why are you doing this to yourself? I asked him if he will lose interest in me if she's out of our lives and it's just us. He looked like he was thinking about this for the first time and then he said that he chose me and my baby. He wants to start therapy and counseling because he thinks this marriage is salvageable. Update 2. We had a dinner with my sister and her fiancé. My husband was unusually silent and didn't initiate any talk with my sister. And he barely looked at her. It was a nice dinner. My sister is too happy to notice anything with her engagement and trip tomorrow. Before she went, however, my husband hugged her, longer than usual. He told her he was happy for her and wished her a great trip, all while hugging her. Then he held her hand and told her, I didn't congratulate you properly yesterday because I was drunk, and he congratulated her again. He was tearing up again. Then he hugged my sister's fiancé and congratulated him. He was silent on our way home. He told me he loved me when we got back and that he will do anything to make this work, but that I shouldn't take any decisions while hurt. We are starting couples therapy. I want him to be 100% honest. He asked me not tell anyone about his confession because it meant nothing. I told him that I didn't want him around my sister anymore if I would give him a chance. He asked me how this would work when we're always together. She will suspect something and he doesn't want me to tell her because he's embarrassed. I told him he could just minimize his interactions with her. I told him to sleep on the couch again tonight because I haven't made up my mind about my next move yet, and that until then it's the couch for him. What an exhausting day. Update 3. I just don't think I have enough information to make a new post. But I have gone through all the comments and thank you. I asked my husband for separation because I need to be on my own to make my decision. We are also starting marriage counseling. Whether we stay together or not. I want to know everything that he has been withholding from me. He thinks I'm torturing myself, but he's wrong. I'm tortured with half-truths. With marriage counseling, I'm hoping I could get to the bottom of his feelings in a safe environment. He cried when I told him that I wanted to separate. He told me he has lost everything in one day because of a drunk confession that meant nothing. He loves me and he wants to be with me. He suggested that we move away. He has had job offers in other cities on several occasions. He said this could be our new start. We were renovating the basement this summer to make it a guest room because our current guest room is being turned into a baby room. He will live in the basement. It has separate entrances and the mini kitchen is almost finished. I have decided not to tell my sister about any of this. This is my battle in my marriage. I love my sister so much, but I'll be very honest here. I resent her. I'm jealous of her and I think I have always been jealous of her. She's a way better person than I'm. I hate that I never had the chance to return the favor, as she always been perfect and never needed help. I resent that she isn't as angry as I'm about the injustice we had to endure. I hate that she's so good to me and my husband. I hate that he sees how much better of a person she is, and I hate that I don't blame him for loving her instead of me. Update 4, The Aftermath. Hi. I was here about a month ago. The short version is that we're getting a divorce, and that he doesn't want to have anything to do with our daughter. After my sister's engagement, and his confession, he made me a promise that he will love me and that he's going to do all in his power to be a good and loving husband and father. He didn't want me to tell my sister anything because he was embarrassed, and we slowly started to plan a future together in another city. He was already getting a better job offer in the other city, and now he thought it was time to move on. I agreed. We started marriage counseling. I told my sister that we were moving and she was very distraught, but she as always didn't object and supported me. I don't know if she felt it was weird that my husband wasn't hanging with us anymore, but she never asked. She was probably just busy with her own happiness and the changes in her life. After her vacation, she came home and told me everything. She was pregnant and she was glowing, and that was the reason for this sudden engagement. Her fiancé wants to get married before the baby was born. She asked me to keep it a secret. She probably didn't mean even from my husband, but I kept it a secret anyway, because she was waiting for the second trimester to make the announcement. She finally broke down crying, however, about me moving away when she needed me the most, but then later apologized for being selfish. She understood that we needed to provide the best life for my daughter, including finding better jobs elsewhere. I cried for a whole week. A week ago, my husband was in a job interview in the other city, and he was going to stay there for the week to sign a lease to a new apartment. We thought we could try out the new life before selling our house to buy a new one there. My sisters and her boyfriend made the announcement that they were expecting last Tuesday, the day after my husband's interview. Not 30 minutes later, my husband called me. He was drunk and he was crying and asking if it was true and if I knew. He called me a cruel liar for not telling him. He said it was so unfair. My sister's fiancé was a loser and he didn't deserve her. Her fiancé is a carpenter and my sister is a pediatrician, and he told me he needed to be alone for a while, so switched off his phone. Friday he texted me that he didn't want to be with me anymore and that he didn't want to be in my daughter's life. He was sorry but couldn't do it anymore. If I agreed to free him from his responsibilities as a father, he will leave me the house. I tried calling him, but he had switched off his phone again. I cried all night. Yesterday morning my sister called me to ask what's up. My husband has asked her to meet up with him because he wanted to tell her something that he couldn't say over the phone. That he was coming on Monday to see her. She asked me what's going on, but I was too tired to tell her anything. She and her fiancé are coming over today, and I will probably need to tell her everything now. Final update. Well, my sister came here and I told her everything. I got help from showing her parts of what I have written here because honestly I'm too tired to go into details about what I've been going through all these weeks. I told her that Lucas was going to call asking to meet her, probably to tell her he loved her. Or maybe something more sinister, so she need to stay away from him. Her fiancé was on the edge of his seat with anger. My sister was just crying and apologizing and trying to hug and stroke my hair. I hated her touch, I don't know why, I know nothing is her fault. I told my sister that since now I warned her, I want to be in my own for a while and that I didn't want any contact with any of them. I have been thinking about moving to another city. There's a small town that one of my best high school friends live in after getting married. It's up north and everything is bigger and better and cheaper. I can easily find a small rental until the divorce is final, and I can easily get a job there. If I can manage a pace there, I can give birth up there with zero stress. I texted my husband that I've told my sister everything and that both her and her fiancé aren't happy. He called me an hour later. He apologized and told me he didn't mean to freak her out. He just wanted to see her and say goodbye, but that he won't bother her if she feels scared. He's still the same man and wouldn't let anything happen to her. He didn't ask about me or our baby. He's staying in the new place and he's starting his new job in September. He thought he would come back to say goodbye before moving to his new city permanently. My sister texted me later that she loved me and that she would stay out of my way if that's what I wanted, but to please not go through with my plans to move. Because she needs me and she would do anything to make it up to me. I didn't answer. I hate it when she's so perfect and kind. I just discovered my dad is cheating on my mom with someone my age. Now I'm sitting on a secret that could blow up everything. For some backstory, almost a year ago my family experienced the loss of my grandpa, my dad's father. It was sudden and it struck my father really hard. He started having more emotional outbursts, being more reclusive, etc., and we tried our best to be understanding and help him in any way he needed. He found himself a therapist and seemed to be working through a lot of his feelings and thoughts. He still wasn't acting entirely like the him we once knew, but death affects everyone differently and this made his behavior easy to excuse. My dad and I don't live in the same city, and so we often meet up at halfway points for lunch. We have always been close, so it's commonplace for us to talk about our feelings, emotions, and recent life events with each other. Now onto the story. During our first lunch since my grandpa's passing, I noticed my dad talking a lot about this new girl at his work. We will call her Stacy. He said that Stacy was helping him a lot with his trauma and being there for him. Stacy's husband had been through some similar traumas that my dad had experienced, and that was being brought up in therapy, so he said she offered him support. He really felt he could be himself around her. He made it abundantly clear that he did not feel he could be himself around his wife of 20 years, my mom, but that he could with Stacy. I thought this was an odd comment to make, and I think this is where my suspicions of their real intentions began, but I knew he was struggling and it made me feel relieved that he had someone he trusted. It struck me as a little weird that she was 29, but again, sometimes workplaces can create weird and unexpected friendships, and with me being 26, I wondered if maybe he saw her as another daughter since I wasn't able to be around much due to distance. He assured me that Stacy was married to a man named Andrew. They were strictly friends. But in his own words, people from his work had started to think something was going on between them, so they had stopped talking at work and had moved to texting. He even went so far as to later in the conversation say that he thinks a strong marriage should be able to survive someone cheating. I assured him that that wasn't healthy and that I'm not sure what kind of relationship he wanted with his wife, but I did not want a relationship founded on infidelity. Obviously, my alarm bells were going off. With what little information I had on Stacy, I went and found her online. I stalked her, and just like my dad said, she was seemingly in a young, happy marriage with Andrew. She kept her social media pretty private, but from what I could see, she looked like your average 29-year-old woman. I couldn't possibly imagine what she would want with my dad, and if anything, I thought maybe my dad had a work crush that he was reading too much into. No one wants to think that their dad could be capable of a full-blown affair. Over the next few visits with my dad, I would hear him continually talk about Stacy when telling stories about work or talking about his friends. She always seemed to come up. I couldn't help but notice that he would avoid calling her by name. She would just be she or her or girl from work. It's as if he completely forgot the things he had told me about her. Or as if he was afraid to say her name around me. Infidelity is never mentioned again, but he is always talking about how he's fighting with my mom, Lily. How as he goes through therapy, she might not like the man he's becoming. He tells me how he's standing his ground and getting into verbal arguments with her. I imagine this is self-sabotage due to his guilt because of the cheating. Fast forward to today, about a year since I first heard about Stacy. I went on my laptop, which I do not use often. I opened Instagram and I realized I still had my dad's login credentials saved on my computer from a one-off back in 2016. My dad is and always has been sketchy with his password, so I assumed that likely it wouldn't work, but I tried the login anyways. To my surprise, I was in. I won't even pretend like I didn't know exactly what I was looking for or like I'm above looking through his DMs. This is also where I messed around and found out. I opened their DMs, which were pretty bleak at first. I thought that I could rest my suspicions, more like hoped, until I couldn't. It started out with sending corny photos to each other. Things about "you can kiss me whenever you want, I'm yours and your arms feel like home and I'm homesick." Really juvenile weird crap. Things I wouldn't send to a coworker if you paid me. Still in denial, I kept scrolling, and that when I saw it. Exposed pictures, from her only, thank God, full-blown dirty conversations about their existing partners and the potential of leaving them for each other, I love yous, conversations with their plans to sleep together for the first time, etc., etc., etc. You get the picture. All of my suspicions laid out in front of me. He was willing to risk it all for a married woman 3 years older than his daughter. He was willing to hurt the woman he had supposedly loved for 20 years, destroy his family, destroy Stacy's family for what? Absolute selfishness. The worst part for me was that they actively talk about their existing partners in this chat. Stacy is always making fun of my mom. Does Lily wear lacy bras for you? Does Lily let you go down on her with her bush? Lol. As if Stacy couldn't become more a disgusting human, as if she's not already sleeping with a married 53-year-old father of 2, she has to degrade his wife. An innocent victim in this situation. They assure each other that they love their current partners so much that it hurts, and they don't understand how they can have the capacity to love 2 people at the same time. It's disgusting and childish. I don't know how this ends. They still work together and closely together. I cannot bring myself to tell my mom. I don't want my dad to know I know. I don't want him to feel backed into a corner like he has to tell my mom. I want him to tell my mom because he knows it's the right thing to do. I have looked up to my dad my whole life, and I feel like the whole view I have had of him as this selfless, loving, caring family man has been shattered. I'm so disappointed in his actions. And I don't know what to do. It's eating away at me. Added to add, I was told it would be beneficial to add that my parents do have a kid who is a minor who lives with them. I have not known about this affair the entire time. I found out about it on Thursday, so please stop saying that I'm intentionally holding this secret from my father. Update 4 days later, so I finally called my mom. Her and my dad had spent the day together at their cottage, so I waited until they were home and then asked if she could go somewhere alone so we could talk on the phone. Her reaction was nothing like I imagined. She sounded like she already knew. Her reaction also made me feel like this wasn't the first time this has happened. She laughed and asked me what I thought I saw. She blamed herself and said that she doesn't meet my dad's needs. I explained to her that that's not fair and that she doesn't deserve to be lied to and cheated on and put at risk for STDs. I said the way they spoke about my mom in the chat was disgusting and that this was wrong. She asked to see the screenshots, so I sent them to her. She kept reassuring me that her and my dad were in it for the long haul and wouldn't divorce. I told her I didn't care about that. I said no matter her decision, I supported her either way. Even though it wasn't what I was anticipating, I felt relieved. I felt like a weight had been lifted. She thanked me for telling her and said that I would always be her sweet girl. Everything seemed to be going well until she spoke to and confronted my dad and called me back. I don't know what happened with the conversation between her and my dad, but it's clear that he is a master manipulator and not at all the person I thought he was prior to all this. My mom's tone had completely shifted on the phone. She was scolding me? He confirmed the affair, He confirmed everything I had said and brought forward to her. Somehow they're blaming me. They're telling me I'm wrong. My mom told me that she's read all the screenshots I sent but had nothing to say about them. They're staying together, and in her words, this is just a bump in the road. They've had highs and lows, and they'll have lows again. I said I would support her either way, so I can't be mad, but I can't help but be sad at how low she thinks of herself to accept this behavior. I love your dad and he loves me. What a horrible message to send to your child. She told me that guilt does bad things to people and that she thinks I got myself worked up over nothing. She told me it was wrong of me to look at his Instagram messages and that it was a breach of trust. Ironic considering my dad committed the biggest breach of trust there is in a marriage. I also never would have looked at his messages had he not planted the seed of infidelity in my brain. She explained my dad is very angry with me and she doesn't know if our relationship is repairable. I assumed my dad would be mad at me, of course, but for my mom to seemingly side with him and turn her back on me too is almost too much to take. I know she's being manipulated, but this is where it ends, I guess. I can't stand to look at either of them. I feel like I was just orphaned. I can't fight a fight someone doesn't want me to on their behalf. Deep down I know I'm not to blame for this, don't get me wrong. But it's really hard to not feel awful when your parents, whom you've trusted, turn their back on you. I do feel like I did right by myself in telling my mom the truth, but I can't help but think that everything would have been easier if I never said anything. My dad still follows Stacy. He has blocked me and my fiancé on all social media platforms. He's quite literally showing that he chooses his AP over his daughter. I know he's reacting out of embarrassment and anger, but I've blocked him in return. He doesn't get to choose when he comes back into my life. All of this hurts a lot. Update 4 months later. Hey. I actually do have a small update if anyone is interested. My fiancé and I are still engaged and don't have a set wedding date. When we do get married, it'll be either a small courthouse or an elopement with my family not involved at all. In regard to my dad, short answer? Nope, still an absolute idiot. Long version goes as such. I've been working with a therapist to figure out what I really want to come of all this and how I can proceed with or without my family. I initially settled on no contact with my dad and low contact with my mom. After some thinking, I decided that I wanted to have my dad in my life and rebuild at least an amicable relationship with him. I understand that that may not be what everyone would choose, but I really couldn't imagine my big life events and my future without my dad. I reached out to my mom via text and asked her if she believed my dad was still too angry with me to talk. She urged me to not reach out and asked me to continue leaving the door open and told me that she was encouraging my dad to do the same for me. At that point I decided that if he had to be encouraged to leave the door open for his only daughter, then maybe it actually wasn't worth reaching out to him. He ended up texting me the next day that he unblocked my number, but he wasn't ready to talk. I waited 3 weeks for him to text me but received nothing more. I reached out just asking for a timeline on when I can expect that he will be ready to talk, and he replied saying he has been waiting for me to contact him. The conversation started fine. He said he loved me and he missed me. He said that we were just going to have to agree to disagree on the whole situation. I explained that wouldn't be happening and that I didn't care about the cheating. That's not my problem. My problem is how he has hurt me and how his silent treatment affected me. This is obviously not what he wanted to hear. I'll save y'all the nitty-gritty. The conversation ended with him saying he was mad at me because I didn't come to him first and give him a chance to come clean, but in the same message said that if I had kept my nose out of his business he would have taken this secret to the grave, and that it was me who hurt my mom because I told her. He repeatedly demanded that I apologize to my mom for hurting her and apologize to him for betraying his trust. There was a lot more to the conversation, of course, but to wrap this all up I doubled down that I did nothing wrong. He is the one who betrayed his wife, and if my mom would like an apology she is more than welcome to reach out to me directly. Other than that, we're done here. His number is blocked. I don't plan on unblocking him. I feel confident in my decision this time. I don't feel like him and I are existing in the same reality. I don't feel like he's the dad I once knew. Sorry this is so long and not a happy ending at all, but it does feel nice to get this all out here. God, please let it be the end. My boyfriend and his girl best friend planned a week-long vacation just for them, after she said having me along would make her uncomfortable. My 28 female boyfriend, 29 male, wanted to go on a vacation this summer to his mom's friend's house in Hawaii with me and his 2 best friends, 25 male and 29 female. We had been planning on this all spring, and at some point, 25 male dropped out of the trip, leaving just the 3 of us. For context, my boyfriend and I have been going out since November, and it's been serious. We had, and still have, been talking about moving in together, and he has said, and I agree, that this is a long-term situation and that we are in it for good. In early June, once 25 male unexpectedly dropped out of the trip, 29 female called my boyfriend and told him that now that it was just the 3 of us, she didn't feel comfortable with me going on the trip, since she didn't know me that well, and she didn't want to be a third wheel. She said that if I were to go, she wouldn't go on the trip. Without telling me that this was happening, they changed the plans and made it a trip just the 2 of them, and they changed the location to a beach in Costa Rica. I was trying to figure out when to ask for time off this summer and hadn't heard news about the plans, so I asked my boyfriend which week in August I should be setting aside for the Hawaii trip. He let me know that, actually, he had talked to his friend and that she didn't want to go if I were going, so he was going to go alone with her to Costa Rica. He said that we could go another week later, maybe to Mexico City or something. I was upset and tried to talk with him about how the situation made me feel, especially since this wasn't a case of a separate trip being set up ahead of time. This was a case of me being invited and then uninvited from a week-long tropical vacation with a girlfriend of his who I had never met before. We eventually decided to do a trip together to Copenhagen, which we have both wanted to visit, as some sort of compensation. I also asked to meet her, so that I could feel more comfortable with the trip. We spent the 4th of July going to see her and her boyfriend in the city where they live, and although it was nice to put a face to a name, it was ultimately a very cold trip, and she was not at all welcoming to me. My boyfriend remarked on how unfriendly she was, to both of us, he thought, and said that he was surprised that she didn't act warmly to me. I went out of my way to try and get to know her and her boyfriend. I'm very outgoing and friendly, and usually this would be easy, but it didn't really click, even after several days. They were somewhat cold to each other as well. They bickered a little bit about their future and his own 3-week trip without her that was scheduled for the same time as their trip. This had been scheduled before ours had. This had been my effort to feel better about the trip, so I told my boyfriend that I still didn't feel comfortable with things, and that I was feeling insulted by the way that it was handled. I had tried to make things smooth between all of us, and I asked him to please come up with something that could help me feel better about the trip. On a visit to his family, they asked about the trip and they were all shocked that he would have arranged it this way, and let me know that they would have been furious if they were in my position, which triggered a fight in which I asked him to please help come up with a strategy to make me feel better and more secure about them going together without me. He said that he would never do this kind of thing again, which feels like not much to offer, since this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip to begin with. He kind of offered to not go on the trip, but he had already paid for the tickets and made arrangements, and I didn't want to stop their trip and be resented by both him and his best friend. He asked me to give him ideas of how to make me feel better and wanted me to just tell him what to do, and he stalled and stalled until it was finally the day of the trip. He bought me a bag of peanut butter cups and I drove the two of them to the airport. I feel so disregarded and disrespected in this situation. I want to break up with him, but I don't want to burn up something that has otherwise been really good. Update: I was really upset the day I dropped him off, and he was texting me but I wasn't responding. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do anything at all in the state I was in. I waited until the next day, and then I sent him a thought-out text letting him know that I didn't feel safe or loved in the way the trip was handled and that I would be dropping his things off at his place and leaving his keys with the neighbor. He called but didn't leave any messages, and then he messaged me that he didn't understand. The rest of the week, he called and messaged me, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up or text back. On Thursday, I think that he realized that I was serious, and he asked me some questions about logistical things. I told him which neighbor his key was with, etc. When he got back and saw all his things at his place, he got pretty frantic and called and left me a long message. I was working all day, but also I still didn't want to respond. He asked me to explain because he didn't understand what was going on. The next day, I sent another text making it clear that it was over, and he got upset and sent me a bunch of texts in a row about how he didn't understand why I was throwing away everything that we built. He left me a voicemail that was really angry that said he had no idea why I was upset and that he did not accept the breakup, because he had no say in it, and that he wanted me to tell him the evil story that I had made up about him to his face. I wasn't going to respond to him and I wanted to remain calm, but this upset me. So I sat down to write him this letter. It's long. I tried to call him but I started crying and told him I'd just send him an email instead. This is what it said. The time that we have had apart has given me some good space and time to think. I have had a chance to think about the things that are important for me in a relationship and I see that we should not be together. I'm sorry that I have been asking for you to change things about your life that you shouldn't have to change at my or anyone's behest. From the very start, this trip was made in an insanely disrespectful way in which it started out from you being given an ultimatum by your female best friend who I had never met that either she goes or I go on this trip, and you picked her. You didn't offer to have her meet me. Theoretically I was your long-term partner, so this would have made a lot of sense. You didn't encourage her to find someone else to come, and you didn't consult me at all. That's enough for most people to have a deal breaker, right there. However, I stayed. This is a person who you have a history with that is not entirely clear to me. Here is what I understand. Some bad rumors got started about the two of you in which you spent an entire night out with her on an acid trip while you were dating someone else. Nothing happened. The other thing I understand is that you were interested in her romantically at some, theoretically other, point and that she started dating her boyfriend, and that closed the door on things for you. According to what I also understand, it took a long time for 29 females' boyfriend to feel comfortable with you being around, but you apparently worked to ultimately make him feel comfortable with you after I'm not sure how long. This is the completely unknown person who shut me out of a trip that I was originally going to go on, unilateral decision. You did not tell me this was happening until I asked when the trip to Hawaii would be. You purchased tickets in another very disrespectful situation in which I have cooked dinner and have guests present, and you chose to go into my room for well over an hour to select tickets with her, and in which I repeatedly ask you to please come to dinner because you say it will just be a few more minutes each time. There is absolutely no reason for doing it at that time and in that situation, seeing as how she is in the same time zone as us and has a 9-to-5 job. This makes me feel sick to my stomach. So, to make myself feel better about this whole arrangement, I tell you that I want to meet this person. On my request, we arrange a trip to go meet her and her boyfriend, a brief trip in which they are, and you explicitly agree, inexplicably cold. The first conversation that we have is one in which 29 female and her boyfriend argue about how she DM'd him while he was already in a relationship and got him to date her instead. You tell me about conversations that 29 female has had with you recently in which it seems implied that there is some real instability in their long-term relationship, stuff about kids and dogs. I have a discussion in which I let you know that I see that and that it worries me. Meanwhile, I am still wanting all of this to work out for you and for me and for her. I, at this point, am planning on being with you for the long term and see no benefit in telling you to not go on a trip with your best friend. I want it to work out. But each and every interaction surrounding this trip chips away at my ability to handle it, the conversations that seem to go nowhere, etc. Your dad, your mom, and your grandparents are all very surprised when we tell them about this trip. It is becoming very obvious that this is a dangerous trip to make with the fragility of our relationship. 29 male. We had only been together for 9 months. How long did it take before 29 female's boyfriend was comfortable with you hanging around? Much less going on a one-on-one international tropical vacation in which he was uninvited because of your request. We go over it with friend at the rock climbing gym. We go over it in the car. We go over it while we're booking our Airbnb for Copenhagen. We go over it when I tell you that I still feel uncomfortable, and I do not feel good about the trip. Talk about repeatedly saying something. Ultimately, it appears that the original plan to meet at my place and hang out and do a game night before you two go on the trip has been cancelled, and 29 female will be staying at my place, but not hanging out with us at all beforehand. You attribute it to you not bringing it up with her early enough. This is apparently not something that was discussed even 2 nights before the trip. You do not know what to do. I don't blame you. At this point, it was well out of hand. There is no good solution that I can think of besides waiting for the trip to be over. I tell you that either I have to get over it, or I have to break up with you, and that I don't want to break up with you. But my ability to get over it is rather worn down. She arrives at my place very late, and we wake up the next morning for me to take the two of you to the airport. After all of this lead up, I know that you can tell how unhappy I am. I fully absolutely know you can tell how unhappy I am. You leave, and when I don't respond to your text messages, you text me to tell me that you hope I'm okay and you're going to bed. No call. The rest of the week was rough. My text to you was met with, essentially, I'm sorry you feel this way. You tell me that I'm being unfair. There is no acknowledgement, and there still has been none, that this trip to a damn honeymoon destination, as we have discussed before, could be a crazy and horrible thing to go through with, even with my quasi-blessing. This is not something that people in relationships have to deal with. This is not something that people in relationships do, besides 29 female, I guess. In the end, all of this is to say that I have felt serious emotional needs go seriously unmet in a way that is a deal-breaker for me. There have been some wonderful, very positive times, but there has been an unnecessary amount of heartache and suffering for me over things that come down to what I can only assume are personal differences. I cannot handle your relationship with 29 female. And I suppose I could ask you to pick between her and me, but that's not what I want to do. I want you to have your best friend, and I want to leave. I did love you, but I am not about to fight this fight and hear you tell me that I'm crazy for not seeing how totally platonic everything is for the rest of my life. It seems like trying to convince someone to like different food, or to have a different favorite color. I am not happy in this, and I do not want to feel these feelings any longer. There is no need for this to be mutual. I do not need your permission to break up with you. He wrote me back an apologetic email in which he accepted responsibility for most things without any argument, except he denied anything that had to do with his relationship with her making me feel uncomfortable, and he denied that I would not be able to handle their relationship. He said that the only thing that made their trip bad for me was my own perspective. I wrote him back that trust has to be built and that he put too much strain too early on a relationship in which we had not developed that trust. He agreed and apologized. For me, it ended on a pretty amicable note, but this style of relationship really doesn't work for me, and I don't feel like his responses to me really healed or changed anything significantly. I stand by my decision at this point.